On this episode of the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, it's recap time. After a couple annual conferences that the team got to go to, we'll also talk about some of the things that we noticed and learned at these conferences about in-person interactions, the value of being in person, and how important it is for outdoor ministry experiences. Welcome to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, where we dive deeply into theology, research, and practical wisdom for camps, retreat centers, and other key ministry spaces. I'm your host, Jared Rendell, camp enthusiast and part of the Sacred Playgrounds team. This podcast features Dr. Jake Sorensen, a scholar and practitioner who's helping us all think more deeply about outdoor ministries. Wander with us what God might have in store at your Sacred Playground. Hey, welcome to the playground, everyone. Jake, I don't see Christmas decorations in the background. Are you Halloween's done, get the tree up kind of guy, or are you no way, it doesn't happen until after Thanksgiving? Or
you know what? I appreciate the question. This is really a meaningful thing to me because in my household growing up, we always waited until Thanksgiving time. And that was just part of it, so putting up the tree and doing all those things were kind of the day after Thanksgiving or the weekend after Thanksgiving. And so I'm not a curmudgeon or a Scrooge. I appreciate the seasons. And maybe that's part of living in Wisconsin. I really appreciate the seasons and the changing of the seasons. And so we're getting towards Thanksgiving time, but here in Wisconsin, it's also deer hunting season, and so that's a big family event and a community event here in Wisconsin for all those who partake in that. And all those who don't just need to wear blaze orange everywhere. But it's part of the Thanksgiving holiday. And so this is kind of the official start to the holiday season for us. And I'm excited about getting out in the woods and being close to nature and being close to family. And then Thanksgiving, of course, we're getting together with family after we all get tested for COVID. And make sure nobody's positive. And then we'll put up our Christmas decorations. And so that's kind of how we do things around here. How about you guys? Do you have a tradition?
I don't know if you've seen this meme. There's like a fall winter meme that went around the last few years, like of a calendar of sorts, and it's like, here's how the season works. Right, October, all of which is Halloween, especially if you're a parent, because you're planning and trunk or treats or whatever the other thing is. So all of that is Halloween. And then immediately after Halloween is Christmas part 1. And then there's 3 days for Thanksgiving, right? Like the day after when you're still feeling it, the Black Friday time, and then it's the rest of Christmas. That is how our family works. The tree is not up yet, although last year we had everything up. So we're feeling behind. We got work to do up in here.
All right. Well, I think we've effectively dated this podcast. So if you are listening months later, the reason we're talking about this is because it's Thanksgiving's coming
soon. We're talking today. We got to go to a couple in-person things over the last month. You in particular, I got to join you on one of those for a little bit. But Sacred Playgrounds got to spend time at 2 camp conferences over the last month. And so we thought we'd share a little bit about what we learned, what the experience was like. And then that opened up some things around the value of being in person. So curious about that. We've got, we did learn some data about that and some of a couple different projects around what that's like. So we'll dive into that a bit. You got to be all in at these conferences. So how was it? How were these?
I loved it. I've been dying here in the basement at my basement office. It's been tough, spending all this time on the computer. It's like people think of me as the research guy sometimes, or the writer, and I do that stuff because we need to run a business. But what I love to do is be out with people. I love to visit camps. I love to be with the kids. I love to be with my people. And so I just loved being at these conferences. So I got to spend a week with the United Methodists out in Pennsylvania. and see a new camp out there, Jumonville, and just see some great friends. And then last week we were together. It was great to see you in person because it's been a while. Like we've
A
been doing
long
this
time.
Zoom thing all the time, and so just to be together, but also to be
Truth.
together with kind of my home tribe with the Lutheran family, because that's the camping tradition that I come out of. It was really
Mhm.
fun to see friends that I haven't seen it's been years now. I mean, it's been 2 years since our group had been in person. And so I enjoyed the heck out of that. Plus, we had a great program to boot. And so at each of the conferences, there were great presenters. I learned a lot. Michelle Cummings was at the United Methodist one. She does a whole bunch of group building sort of things with training wheels.
Mm.
Is her business. And then at the LOM conference, it was all about diversity and inclusion. And so we had some amazing guest speakers that talked about all sorts of different ways that we can be more inclusive at camp, and the importance of inclusion, and some of the things to consider. And so really challenged us, especially in the Lutheran Church, is the whitest denomination in the country, basically. And it's
Right.
really difficult in the camping world to move past that, because there historically camp has also been predominantly a white space. Um, and so, not just in the Lutheran circles, but all of camping in the United States. And that's something that the American Camp Association and others have really tried to address. And so, working to address that in very intentional ways at the conference was really fruitful. And there were some excellent discussions and some great presentations. Um, Specifically about race and working with people of color, and also working with our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, and how we can be welcoming and inclusive of those folks in the camp setting, and people with disabilities. And so it was kind
Mm.
of it was focused in so many ways, but it was also broad in that sense of multiple topics of
It's a
what does it
lot.
mean to be inclusive, what does it mean to have
Hmm.
diverse communities at our camps. And so it was very challenging, I think, for a lot of our camp directors, and called many folks to account. And I'm hopeful though about the future, and folks' commitment to doing real things, action steps that can make their camps spaces of inclusivity and diversity. So um, the efforts are ongoing in the Lutheran circles, and so there's a grant that they're working with, and they've got symposia coming up in the spring, and so there's going to be some very intentional efforts. It doesn't end with the conference, but it really was um, a challenging conference, um, in terms of content, and really encouraging. So all of those things.
Did you go on the water slides? These are the questions that matter.
We were at Great Wolf Lodge for the Lutheran one. The Methodist one was at the camp, and so it was windy
Yeah.
and it was cold at the camp. We were up in the mountains, and so I did get outside there. But at the water park, I ended up, because I was doing so many things and presentations and hanging out with people, I did not go down the water slides. I actually went looking for a hot tub to soak in, and there wasn't one. It was just all water slides. But I will say that the director of Lutheran Outdoor Ministries, Don Johnson, um, he accepted a challenge to go on the surfing element at Great Wolf Lodge. And so we all got
Wow.
video of him doing the surfing. And he did that as a fundraiser for the organization. And it was an
I
event.
love it.
It was an event. So I will give props to my good friend Don Johnson.
Well done, sir. Yeah, we're hoping to have him on here on an episode sometime soon.
Absolutely. So how was your experience? I mean, you got to be there too, at least for
I
for a
did.
day.
Yeah. I wish I could have simply made the whole time. It was really good. A lot of these people I have done work with, whether it was helping with some of their marketing or websites or logos or things like that, but haven't seen them in person in a decade or more. For some of them, the last time I got to go to that conference was I was mapping it out. I think it was 8 or 9 years ago, and so I hadn't seen some of them in a long time. So, like you said, that's my tribe though, down in my guts. So when you get there and you're seeing some of these people, it's a heart and gut level that you're and you're brought back, right? You're brought back to these, to these memories of your own time, and the ways that you've interacted with them before and seen them before, and done good work with them before. So so good to see, so good to see some of those people. I was struck, of course, with the amount of new faces, though, too, that I didn't know, that I haven't
It
met.
was a well-attended conference.
Yeah,
There were over 200 people there.
that's a ton. Yeah, the LOM one. Um, it seemed like multiple camps brought multiple people, so I appreciate that too. That they brought multiple people from their team to place value on these in person, connect with others who are going through similar things, especially right now, especially as we've felt maybe more siloed than in all of our time on Earth so far. Felt stuck, and so they're
Yeah,
bringing their teams, to see others who were doing that.
I find it funny that, I mean, our plan originally was, hey, we're going to be in person. Let's sit down with a microphone in person rather than doing Zoom, and we'll record some podcast episodes, as if we were going to find
Great
time to
idea.
do that. And it's so funny how naive we were in that, like, oh, yeah, we'll
Mhm.
have time for this because we'll be in person. But because we were in person, we didn't want to sit down and do something virtual. We didn't want to record something for a podcast or something like that. We wanted to hang out. We wanted to talk to our
Yeah.
friends. We wanted to
Mhm.
hear about the content that the conference was about. And so I just kind of find it funny that now we got to figure out, okay, we got to record a podcast episode because we didn't do it when we were in person because there are too many important things going on when we're in person. The
Yeah.
podcast isn't the most
Yeah.
important thing. It's just something else that we do in order to get the content out when we're not able to be in person. So in that sense, it's a gift. And I love these new media that we're able to reach out to people
Mhm.
with the podcast, with the website, with videos, with social media, all that. But it really highlighted to me, and I laugh about it because of what happened with us, but that being in person is so valuable.
Mhm.
And it's what we're all about, with Sacred Playgrounds, with the camping community, and so forth.
Did you hear the same kind of sentences that I did when I'd ask people, "How's the conference been?" And almost all of them said, "It's so good to be in person." It was part of the answer almost every time.
Absolutely. It was a constant refrain. Um, and this was true with folks that are extreme extroverts like me, if you haven't noticed. Um, but also
Raising my
with
hand over
folks
here.
that are very introverted, you know, but
Hmm.
really value the chance to be with people, even if the energy in a large group of people isn't their jam. um they still talked about the importance of being together and just seeing people and sitting one on
Hmm.
one, because there's a lot of opportunities for one on ones in a conference like that. And just that it was possible, to do that. It was a question mark for a long time of, were we going to get together in person, or were we going to try to do a virtual thing again? And um the group opted to be in person, because of the availability of vaccines and so forth. So everybody had to be vaccinated to attend or have a negative test within the last couple of days, and everybody was masked. And so we tried to be as safe as possible, but also knowing that there's a little bit of risk to being in person, and saying,
Hmm.
you know these measures that we're taking are the best we can do to keep people safe and still have this incredibly important in-person gathering. And that's something that the pandemic has really been teaching us: the importance of presence, the importance of being in person with one another. And that was really highlighted to me again with both of these conferences. um, and just how appreciative I am of my friends, of my colleagues, and of the opportunity to be in person.
Yeah. So it seems like so that the boards, the governing groups, the planning teams had probably a pretty in depth conversation. It sounds like about what do we do about this? How do we do this? And the value of being in person. Yes, with all the precautions we could take. Seemed like that's where
Absolutely.
they landed, and like lots are now. I mean, because this is something that our whole society has wrestled with. Any kind of and everybody has encountered it because this is built in, right? The urge to gather is built in, right? This feels creational now. Um, all the way down. And that is confirmed in how we've built camp for a long time. And even in some of the effective camp research, some of the things that came out, they work because they work in person, right? These are things that couldn't happen
Oh,
in other
absolutely.
ways.
I think that's one of the key characteristics of camp. I mean, we talk about the fundamental characteristics. I mean, participatory is one of those.
Mhm.
Being able to be in each other's presence and to move and to interact with one another is absolutely essential to the camp environment. We don't just learn sitting still and taking in information. We have to be active. We have to be out there. And the relational aspect of camp, it's there are ways to connect with each other over spaces through Zoom, through other video communications, through letters, phone, social media. But the importance of presence is absolutely essential. And when we talk about
Mhm.
the camp environment, that allows for those face to face, person to person interactions that are so valuable for all of us, not just for young people. I would say, especially for young people, because of the need to develop social skills, but really for all of us. And
Yeah.
so we're hearing now in the news about the mental health consequences of the pandemic, and specifically for folks that have been living in isolation. You and I are both blessed to have families. We got kids keeping us busy, so we
Hmm.
we have a this built-in system of community support and care in our own homes, and not everybody has that. And so, um, being able to check in on some of my friends who I know live alone, who I know have had difficulties with mental health in the past, has been important, then trying to get together with them in person when possible has been important during this pandemic, because
Yeah.
a lot of people are struggling with the isolation right now.
Do you like what you're hearing? Go deeper into the research and best practices of Christian camping with Sacred Playgrounds, the book. This brand new resource is Jake's most comprehensive contribution to the field of outdoor ministry. It is loaded with stories and research from Christian camps across the country and around the world. It traces the history and theology of outdoor ministry, focusing on the 5 fundamental characteristics of Christian summer camp. This is the premier resource for Christian camp professionals, church leaders, camper parents, and all those passionate about camping ministry. Order Sacred Playgrounds wherever you get your books.
All right, welcome back. So Jake, I don't think I've said before on here necessarily. So by day, my job is at a church. I'm a communications director at a church. And partway through this pandemic, we changed my role from some of the like gritty computer and IT stuff I did to some more of the community roles. And specifically, part of my job was to create space online for people to connect. We realized over the course of this pandemic, and as we were starting to come back in person, that we were not going to stop being a hybrid community, that there's value in these online connections and online experiences. So, folks watching worship at home on YouTube on their TVs, hopping in onto something like a Zoom for coffee hour afterward, um, being able to stream all these different experiences for folks who are, whether it's they need to stay home from a health reason, or they're on the go, or they worked a double shift the night before, or whatever it might be. There's value in these things. There's value in these connections. When I do kind of coaching on marketing or websites or digital space things with churches or with camps, I talk about these things as a space, not just a tool that we use. And so these are spaces for connections, and there's value in them. And yet, they were never designed to be replacement. They were never designed to be replace the in-person interactions. So the more that we can use, even from a sensory experience, the more that we can use all our senses in our connections, the deeper the chance for that connection is, right? Because we know creationally there's value in these in-person interactions.
Absolutely. You know, as you said there at the end, we're created to move, we're created to be in each other's space and to interact with one another with all of our senses. And so it's not just the voice communication between us. It's not just the eyesight communication between us. It's the being in each other's presence. It's the smells. It's the touch. It's being there together. It's all of these senses together that help with our relationship building and our interaction with one another. And so that's why, you know, the teachers, when they were forced to teach virtually, that was a big challenge for them. They couldn't be there with the child. They couldn't sense what was going on with the child's attitude as they were absorbing the information or not absorbing the information. They couldn't reach out and redirect as a child is getting distracted. And so virtual instruction was incredibly difficult for these teachers, particularly with younger children. And so that's all an approximation. Your experience with church is very similar, it sounds like, in terms of like, we do this because we were in pandemic. It's an incredibly valuable thing to have when we can't be in person. We've known this for a long time. I mean, we think of shut-ins and other folks that can't be to church. They can't physically be there, even though they want to be there. And so the video worship that we're able to provide them, or the recorded tapes that we're able to provide them, allows them a connection point with the community that they know and love. But that's the community that they formed while in person. And so it's not, they wouldn't choose to sit at home and not be there. They are forced to because they are shut in at home, or they are in the nursing home. And so we have to remember that these tools are wonderful connection points for folks that need accommodation, and they are simply not replacements. And they never were meant to be, as you say. And what they are, they're approximations. They're our best approximations. And we're getting better at these approximations through things like video conferencing and other things like that, through virtual reality, augmented reality sorts of things. But we're never going to replace in person. This is especially true for the young kids. And so that's the thing that we have to constantly remember as we think about the pandemic, as we think about what is life going to look like as we move forward. We are going to need to continue with virtual communication. We are going to need to continue offering, virtual online worship for people who can't be there. Maybe they're on a vacation or something like that. Well, they can still connect to their church community. They can watch later in the week. And that's a way to approximate it, even though they're not there in person, adding their voices to the hymn and the prayers and things like that.
Yeah, these are both and. These are both and. This isn't either or.
Absolutely both and. We're not going to get rid of these other things, and we shouldn't try to. No. But what we need to be careful of is that the virtual space does not come to replace the in-person space, because it never can as effectively. And that's the reminder. The virtual allows us, while we're absent from each other, to be present in approximation. There's this great book that talks about social networking, and it refers to this idea as absent presence. Even though you're absent from a group, you can still be present virtually. That's what these wonderful communication tools allow us to do. And yet it's not the same as being in person. And we see the same thing with camp. And as we think about the camp experience and the importance of being in person at camp, nothing will ever replace that. We can do virtual communications and things like that, but if we're talking about camp, it has to be in person. There has to be sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touch. All of those things have to be present there. And the physical presence of the other is what is one of the most valuable pieces of the camp experience. It's a pastoral presence. We're being Christ to one another. We are ministering to one another when we are there for them, physically there for them, taking time to be there for them in their presence, just sitting with them. It's not timed, right? We sit there for as long as we need to when we're being a pastoral presence for somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, when we did this survey of parents during the pandemic, asking about opportunities, how can camp serve you? When will you be comfortable for in-person camp again? And one of the questions that we asked was about these online or virtual camp experiences. And, would you participate in these sorts of things? And it was a very overwhelming no to these sorts of virtual things, that we're not interested. And these were folks that were camp folks. Like they were the most involved, the ones that had sent their kids multiple times. A lot of them supported the camp financially.
Yeah.
And we asked them about virtual camp, and almost nobody said they would pay for it. And so we asked them, hey, would you do it for free? And it was less than a quarter said they would even participate in something like that, even if it was free. They're not interested in the online things. And so we heard this over and over again. I'm virtualed out. I'm zoomed out.
Right.
That's a real feeling, especially for parents who are trying to keep their kids engaged.
Wasn't necessarily, this platform is bad, this thing is bad, this way of connecting is bad, I can't do another thing in those spaces, because a bunch of it you have to. And yeah, so to not be able to, especially something that in all of their experience so far was so tactile, right? Was so move and there and presence based.
Absolutely. So when we think of things like brain science and learning, one of the theories that gets bandied around a lot is the theory of multiple intelligences. This was Howard Gardner. And a lot of times people use this theory as a way of saying, oh, I am a visual spatial learner, so I don't need to do all these other things. Or I am a kinesthetic learner, so I don't need to do all these other things. And that's not really what the theory's about. The theory talks about, there's these 8 modalities of learning, and we all might have a primary one, but we all need to incorporate all of these styles of learning in order to learn most effectively. And so when we're only focused on something like the linguistic verbal learning, so kind of logic based, that's if I sit still and I hear a presentation, that's primarily a linguistic verbal communication. That can be an effective way of learning, but that's not the only way that I learn. And so I need to have the visual spatial things, the musical, rhythmic, and harmonic mode of learning, which is one of them. Bodily kinesthetic. I have to have movement. There has to be this interpersonal learning. Naturalistic is one of them. And so all of these different intelligences, as Gardner puts it, that we have to engage in order to learn properly, in order to take in the world and to interpret it and to make meaning from the world. And so when we think about the virtual space, again, it's an approximation, but nothing takes the place of being in person.
So where do we go from here? What are we telling camp folks about this? What does this tell us for our thoughts about the future? The kinds of experiences and things that we're going to create?
I think 2 things. I think 1, encouragement that you matter, and you matter now more than ever. In this time of pandemic, camp is absolutely essential. We need these spaces. We need camp to be exactly what camp has always been, and to do exactly what camp is good at. People always in times of crisis say, how can we innovate? How can we do things differently? The innovation is to be exactly who you are and to double down on it. Bring people together in person, live into your identity of who you are. Because we heard this not only with camp people, we also heard it with retreat participants. Would you want to do a virtual retreat? People aren't into virtual retreats. They want to come away and participate in person. That is an incredibly valuable piece of all of these things. So that's the first thing. I mean, be encouraged that people need you more than ever and live into it. The second thing is the response to some of these pushes for virtual connection. And that is to remember first that that's not what camp is about. And so you can't do virtual camp and call it camp. It's not. It's a different program. Not that it's not something that can be valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But don't think that that's going to replace camp ever. However, because of how people are now using these virtual spaces, because of the availability and the closer approximation that we have to the face-to-face learning, like you and I can communicate face-to-face in a way over video
Mm-hmm.
communication. These are things that we should be engaging and we should be using. They're points of connection. And so if you think of it as an approximation or a continuation of the in-person, then we have tools that we can use as our camps. So we say, all right, we develop these relationships in person. We promote the importance of in-person learning, and then we can help people stay connected, even though they're not in the same space anymore. That was always the difficulty of being away from camp. Okay, now it's just over. I might never see these people again. Maybe we can exchange addresses and I can write a letter. Well, writing letters is not as big of a deal anymore. Even emails aren't as big of a deal anymore. What if we can engage them in a virtual space and they can see one another again and be transported through time and space to that time when they were in person? The sights, the smells, the feeling of being together, all can come back to them. And so that's a way that we can leverage the virtual spaces while at the same time not selling out what camp is most valuable for. So live into your identity and use these new spaces to enhance the camp experience when you're away from camp.
Amen. Amen. All right, everyone. If you have something that you have tried unique, maybe it's unique in digital space or something that you have heard from your folks, we would love to hear about that too. We'd love to hear your story about your unique idea, your unique way of being hybrid, or simply as you've been in person. What have you heard from your campers and your families? Does this sound true? Does this resonate with you? Drop that in the comments or send us a story from an email, and we will see you next time on Sacred Playgrounds Podcast. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds Podcast. This episode was produced by me, Jared Rendell, and featured Dr. Jake Sorensen, lead researcher and founder at Sacred Playgrounds, LLC. Our theme music was written and performed by Taylor Wilson. You can find his original songs wherever you get your music. Learn more and connect with the Sacred Playgrounds team at sacredplaygrounds.com.